Welcome to Iowa Mentors monthly professional development webinar. We're really excited today to have our own Volunteer Iowa volunteer engagement and infrastructure expert, Michelle Raymer, with us, who's going to share information about utilizing skill-based volunteers in your program. This came out with conversations that we've had during the coffee chat with increasingly more that you're trying to accomplish with your programs and struggle sometimes to get to all the tasks that you'd like to do for your programs. So first, we're going to turn it over to my colleague, Tony Lampley, who's going to lead us in some mindfulness so that we can be engaged with, leave behind what we're doing and be engaged with this learning. So Tony?
Yes, hi there, you all. How is it going today? I just thought we would take a moment to have a breather because I sure need it. I don't know about you guys, but if you haven't taken a moment to take a deep breath, this would be a good time to do it. We spend 90% of our time doing things unconsciously. So if you are like me, you get up in the morning, you do your ritual, and you make it to the coffee machine or whatever it is that you do. It's you put one foot in front of the other and you don't consciously think about it. But in mindfulness, it helps us control what is going on and we can kind of get out of our own head. So practicing it regularly is something that we should do. So today, our mindfulness exercise is affirmations. So what I'd love for us to do is if you want to be on the screen, you can. If you want to mute yourself, you can. But take a few deep breaths if you haven't, and notice where you are. So if you need to take a few deep breaths, go right ahead and do that. I don't know if you guys want to hear me breathing, so then you can't hear me give you directions, so that won't be good. But take a few deep breaths in from the stomach and let it out. Take another deep breath in and let it out, all the way out. And then take another deep breath in and let it out. Okay, great. I wanted us to start with affirmations because I think that's the easiest thing to do. And if you haven't started your day with those, I highly recommend it. I will definitely put a link in the chat of a place called Utterly Positive. If you've never been to that website, it's pretty great to get some ideas on mindfulness. But the mindfulness exercise I'd love for us to do today is the next slide over. And the affirmation I'd love for us to start with is I believe in my ability to change the world with the work I do. So if you want to put yourself on mute and say that to yourself out loud, that would be great. I put it in 3 different ways off to the right of the slide where you can say, I believe in my ability to change the world with the work I do. I am changing the world with the work that I do. I love how the world is changing with the work that I do. And I see the world changing with the work that I do. So take a moment to say those things to yourself. And I'm going to give us a minute of silence also so that you can say those things. Okay, so this is good for your awareness in raising your self-esteem. It sets you up for success. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this and that you take time to give yourself some affirmations on a regular basis. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony, for transitioning us and centering us a little bit to be present to learn. And we'll turn it over to Michelle to lead us in learning about skill-based volunteering.
All right. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay.
And not just across the room.
Great. Well, I'm so excited to be here today. So prior to joining Volunteer Iowa about, 8, 9 years ago, I actually worked for a mentoring program and participated with this group. So it's great to see some familiar names and faces and mentoring programs, and glad to be here with you all today. So today we're going to be talking about engaging skills-based volunteers. So I thought a great way to kick us off would just be to hear from all of you about kind of reflecting and thinking about a time where you used your professional skills as a volunteer. So thinking about different roles that you've had as a volunteer, maybe with another organization or, with your kid's school or another thing, think through what was an example of a time where you were using professional skills that you had as a volunteer. So I'll give an example first, and then we'll just invite you to either put it in the chat or else unmute yourself and share out. But one example of this is back when I was an AmeriCorps Vista member, and then when I was working for a nonprofit, helped create and coordinate a program for American families to be matched with refugee families to support them in their first year here in the States. And so then I, a few years later was approached by another organization that was working with refugees that was looking to start a similar program. And so I helped them to develop their, volunteer handbook, their kind of process for that, and helped to actually provide the training for the volunteers as they came on board. So that was something that I had, professional experience doing, and then was able to do in a volunteer capacity for another organization. So would someone like to share next, or else go ahead and put in the chat of a time where you volunteered using your professional skills?
I can go ahead and share. This is Colleen with Youth Mentoring at Helping Services. So I've been in the youth mentoring work, doing this, running the mentoring program, helping in the aspect of everything that goes on with programming, matching, doing group events, that kind of thing for the last 6 years. And then 5 years ago, I overtook as service unit director for Winneshiek County Girl Scouts, which is a completely volunteer thing, but a lot of the same things that I do for the mentoring program, I can implement with my leaders who are all volunteers, doing service unit events, those kinds of things. So the two kind of overlap for me that way.
Yeah, fantastic example. Lynn, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, an unusual example, but basically a tornado hit Marshalltown in 2018, and I decided, I can volunteer, I can help. So I went and volunteered to help make what I thought was going to be help make sandwiches through the Salvation Army truck. And our local Salvation Army was involved with all that. And what happened is they wound up saying that we were getting all of these volunteers coming in wanting to help. And it was also the place where anybody that had needs or had damage or had a need for some supplies or some food or that, they were all supposed to come there as well. And because the Salvation Army captain was not there, they were not able to hand out names of places for volunteers to go to. And I'm standing there, they asked me to just plain help hand out these cinnamon rolls and coordinate or just have people write their names down. And I thought, oh, okay, this doesn't make any sense to me when we have a parking lot full of volunteers just ready to help. And some had come from way out of state even to come and help clean up. And so then I would walk over to one of those people that said that they had damage in their yard, and I'd get their address and I would hand it off to the next 10 volunteers, and they would just show up at that house, and it would. So basically I broke the rules, but use those coordination skills of groups and connecting people, which is really what a lot of what we do, and just used it in that volunteer situation. And lots of people had help that day that would have just been sitting around waiting for somebody to, for somehow to be able to make those things happen in their own area. So that was it.
Yeah, and so definitely all of you with your skills in coordinating volunteers, that's something that's well needed in a lot of other situations and a lot of other organizations. And I'll just give the side plug is if your community doesn't currently have a plan for coordinating volunteers in times of disaster, and that's an area you think is a need in your area, definitely reach out, because that's not what the presentation is about today, but also just want to provide a plug that that's something that we're able to help communities with, is developing that plan of, you know, who's going to be the lead organization for coordinating volunteers, how you're going to do the intake for finding out what those needs are, so that way you can match those two groups and make sure people are staying safe while also tracking all those volunteer hours for in-kind match for those big disasters. But yeah, especially obviously that's top of mind with the tornadoes in Madison County and other parts of the state. So yeah, any other examples that people want to share? All right, well, as you're thinking, you know, you may not have necessarily thought about it at the time when you were doing this work, but while you were using those professional skills you have, you were volunteering as a skilled volunteer. So a skilled volunteer, sometimes people say a pro bono volunteer, but it's when you're using professional skills in a volunteer capacity. And so I do want to give the caveat that I definitely recognize that being a good mentor requires skill. You know, being a good listener, you know, being consistent and reliable. There's definitely skill involved with being a mentor. So this is not to say that you know, other kinds of mentoring is unskilled. We'll just, as we use the term skilled volunteers or skills-based volunteers today, we're just talking about professional skills. So not to, you know, place labels on other opportunities that we're providing, but just to provide, you know, some clarity around what specifically we're talking about today. So as you're thinking about, you know, why you would want to involve skilled volunteers, obviously you have, you know, so many volunteers with your mentors, but why engage skills-based volunteers? Does anyone want to share out reasons that you would want to involve skilled volunteers in your organization?
I don't know, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel and they already have the skill, why not utilize that? I guess is my mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I kind of led with this too. It's like for those tasks that you never get to, we all just have these long to-do lists. I know, a lot of you, we go through NQMS or you go through other planning, and you have this whole list of goals and things you want to accomplish. And there's a lot of things that just you never get to without additional help.
Yes, great point, Mary. So there's a group called Common Impact that did some research looking into it and found research that for-profit organizations, so businesses, spend roughly on average 35% of their budget on overhead costs. So, you know, things like marketing and communications and HR and, you know, all those other things. So they're spending a lot of investment in their organization on, you know, what's often described as overhead. Whereas nonprofits are often spending on average 2%. So that's a huge disconnect. So when you think about, you know, nonprofits were often wearing a million different hats, doing a lot of different things. For-profit organizations are often able to have, you know, people who not only do those things, but do like specialized, you know, subsets of what those things are. So, you know, a large organization might be lucky to have a communications and marketing person, where a business might have, you know, this is the person who just does our our video engagement. This person does our social media content. So those people, because they do such a narrow focused thing, they're able to develop deep skill set and knowledge in that one particular thing, well beyond what, many of us are able to do when we're doing that on top of, 60 other things in a given day. So it really allows you to kind of bridge some of that gap by bringing in some of that expertise from outside organizations, and help provide you with those skills that maybe you don't have but are put on your to-do list. So I remember just usual day at work where I would both be like, coordinating the mentoring program, checking in on matches, but also clean the bathroom and staging in-kind donations for our silent auction and taking pictures of them to post online. So, a broader range of skill sets that certainly that wasn't necessarily using what I was good at and my best skills, spending my time on that because I was doing other things that were maybe not in my skill set. And it really helps extend your mission. You're able to do a lot more with funds that, your funds can go farther. You have more people supporting your mission and doing your work and making it just expanding and extending what's possible. So any other things that you might want to add here? And I'll point out that last piece too, is that people want to use their skills that they're good at and they know how to do, or maybe they want to grow and expand too. So this is kind of getting into probably one of my favorite parts of when we think about skills volunteers is just dreaming big about what volunteers can do for you. So kind of creating ideas and brainstorming, what are some examples of things that skilled volunteers can do? I know for mentoring programs, specifically, when I helped run a mentoring program, I would have volunteers come in to do, workshops for our mentees. I had someone come in and do like our mentoring program worked with middle school students and high school students. So someone come in about how to kind of create your brand and, write a resume workshop or give a tour of where they work. I had a volunteer who helped create a calendar of match activities that our matches could go to. We had a volunteer come in and be our kind of computer IT specialist who was able to set up our network and file system and sharing. So, bringing people in who have those expertise that I certainly didn't, or who had more expertise in those areas. So are there any areas that any of you are already engaging skilled volunteers that are helping your programs?
Colleen, I know that Kathy couldn't be on today. I don't know if you could speak to her use of an RSVP volunteer.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. So my colleague, we have an RSVP volunteer, and those are people who go in and sign up for like things that they want to do, and then the RSVP knows agencies to show them. So this woman, after Kathy's matches have been matched for at least 3 months, then the RSVP woman takes over doing those monthly match support, like calls and check-ins where she's reminding them what the monthly event is, what there is to RSVP to, reminding them to read the newsletters, checking how the match is going. If there's any concerns, questions, blah, 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 she checks in with the mentors and with the parents, guardians, and does those calls. 1, because she likes doing stuff like that, and 2, because then it takes the load off of us as mentoring coordinators. Sometimes when your match numbers are getting up there in the 30s, 40s, that's a lot every month to have to do. So it is very nice to have the RSVP person that does that for us.
Yeah, that's great. I know that here at Volunteer Iowa, our VISTA project has expanded significantly. And so we now have, roughly 30 VISTA members across the state. And so our staff are having a hard time being able to regularly check in with the VISTA members and see how they're doing. So we were able to engage one of our former VISTA members to be a mentor to some of our current VISTA members. So once a month, she just calls, checks in on them, to see how they're doing, provide advice from her own experience as a VISTA. So they're able to get that additional professional support and one-on-one time that is maybe an expanded level beyond what we'd be able to do as just staff. Other examples?
This is Anna from Everybody Wins Iowa. We utilize photographers and people help with our marketing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Anna. That's another great space to have people come in and help do some of those components. Graphic design's a great space to have volunteers come in and help.
I know that some of our programs are really good at utilizing college students and interns. Social media is one area I know they've helped with too, and sometimes folks like that kind of maybe a generational thing too. I think that maybe college students are more adept than a program staff may feel in that area. And I know that Big Brothers Big Sisters Central Iowa wasn't able to be on, but I know that Tony has utilized interns to do reference checks, and so that's kind of a neat skill for them to learn too, to check into those references too. So just a couple other examples.
Yeah, I know when I worked more closely with our Vista project, we had a couple of members who served in Sac City with the mentoring program there and helped with one really focused in on fundraising and helped create a program where in partnership with the FFA where farmers could donate their crops, and that could be then changed into a donation to the mentoring program and helped create a volunteer a dinner fundraising event. There was another Vista member who helped create some STEM programming, so that way the matches could come in and participate in these activities that she had created, and then it left kind of a kit of things, so that way the next year it could be replicated over and over. So there's definitely a lot of examples too that, you know, AmeriCorps members even could be those skilled volunteers that are supporting your organization. So as you're trying to identify, you know, what are those potential roles that someone might do? Sometimes it's hard to think like, okay, what do you want to volunteer to do? And like, I don't know. You know, off the top of my head, it's hard to come up with something. So here are a few questions that you can take a look at, and hopefully they can help guide you in considering, you know, what else is possible beyond what I've just, you know, normally thought of. So sometimes it's helpful to think, you know, if money was not an issue, what would your organization be doing that it's not doing now? Like if you could hire all the staff you wanted, you know, what else would you want to offer and provide? And are any of those pieces something that a volunteer could support? Or what's kind of on your wish list or your to-do list that's been there for weeks or months or sometimes years that, you know, you would love to see happen, but you just don't have the capacity to work on it? Is that something that a volunteer could look into and research options? Or thinking about, you know, is there a population or a group that, or a community that you haven't been able to connect with and you really want to expand your programming to that area? Is that something that a volunteer from that area could help be a liaison and identify if there's a need and help make connections there? You know, are there resources you want that you don't have? Are there special skills that you have staff doing that they're just not qualified for, but that's who you have, that you could bring in volunteers or interns that can support that work? Or also just what are the tasks that pull you away from work that you are especially skilled at and good at? Are there things that you're doing, but you feel like someone else could, you know, be trained to do it as well as you, or could potentially even do it better? So sometimes it's even helpful just to look at your position description or think through what it is that you do every day and brainstorm those ideas. I actually like to just keep a running list where whenever something occurs to me, I'll jot it down. And I'm not necessarily recruiting for every, you know, opportunity that I ever think of all at once. But then I have that running list. So if someone comes in and says, you know, I'd really like to volunteer, I can think through, oh, you know, actually they'd be really great for this kind of idea that I had a while ago. So just, you know, trying to keep that brainstorming happening throughout the year. So what we'd like to do now is have you spend a few minutes thinking through some potential volunteer roles for your organization for a skilled volunteer. So we'll take, let's do 2 minutes and just kind of think and reflect on your own and jot down, you know, a handful of ideas of things that volunteers could do at your organization.
same thing work in the match that they're
All right. So hopefully you've come up with a couple of things, at least by now. So what I'll have you do is either put them in the chat, or else if you're willing, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself and share out, one or two of the ideas that you came up with of what a skilled volunteer can do to support your work.
Hey, can you hear me, Michelle?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, cool. I'll say something. I got one thing I have is social media. Someone who's skilled in social media, like digital storytelling, to create posts. I mean, I think in terms of like testimonials, maybe. So testimonials from both mentors and mentees. They could be longer form, like in the way of like actual stories that they write where they interview, or just little, I don't know, creative little snippets somehow. And then they could put them on like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and then maybe other stuff too. I mean, I don't know how to use a lot of media like Snapface or whatever, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they could figure that out. So, and then like another thing I had was just like loading in resources. So like into this mentoring platform that I have, maybe resources that'll help mentors give them ideas in terms of mock interviews, interview etiquette, workplace etiquette, exploration, career exploration, stuff like that. Just, I could go on, but that's just like a couple I thought of,
Yeah, those are great. Love the snap face intern. And seeing some really great ideas here in the chat, marketing into smaller outlying towns in your counties. Yeah, creating those, ambassadors for your program that are from those communities that know everyone, who are the people that know everyone else, and can they be the person that is your connection there. I'm looking at data for you, social media, preparing mailings. And also, as you're thinking about, preparing mailings or planning events, are there ever opportunities where some of your matches can help as your volunteers? Would there be a match that would want to volunteer together and come in and help prep your mailings for you? That might be a nice way that they can spend time together and feel like they're giving back to the program that they, obviously are enjoying participating in. Photos are great. There's a lot of people who either are professional photographers or people who just really enjoy doing photography as a side hobby that would probably really enjoy the opportunity to have their photos featured on some of your materials. Finding ways to thank and keep mentors updated. I know one thing is having I've done before is had kids write thank you cards. So then we just have like a bunch of thank you cards on hand that kids have designed and created. And then whenever it's, need to send a thank you card out, we can use those cards, or the same for like a happy birthday card or something. Because that's certainly something that youth are able to do. And then you have them on hand to send out to people as you need them. And they're, a little bit nicer than if I were to draw a happy birthday card for someone, as an example. Event support, always great. Bilingual volunteers, yeah, that can help you with translation work. Yeah, so a lot of great examples here. Anyone else want to hop on and share?
Angie, I know you joined in not specifically maybe a potential future volunteer opportunity, but I know you have used college students effectively in some skill-based volunteer positions. Did you want to share?
Yeah, with our BV buddies, we've had them, they have their own organization on campus. So we've had them, be coordinators and actually like support for the buddies that are there on campus. And then I did join later, so I'm sorry, but we've, if you've already talked about this, I'm so sorry. But like we've also utilized Vista in the past, and that's been really a wonderful thing for us to do. And we didn't have that happen this year because of COVID. So we've greatly missed that, but that is just kind of like an extension of myself there on campus, and helps with like, background checks and stuff, and just like a bigger support, and helps with organizing like events and things that are happening within our mentoring program.
Yeah, those are fantastic examples. Thanks for sharing. And I'll give an extra plug here too, that if any of you are interested in hosting a Vista member, definitely reach out. Volunteer Iowa, we have an intermediary Vista project where we're able to help place Vista members at other organizations across the state. So if that's ever of interest, reach out and we can, chat with you if that's a good fit for what you're looking for. All right, so you have clearly have a lot of fantastic ideas. So then, what's next? How do you get started? First, I would definitely recommend creating a volunteer position description. So that helps just make sure that you have a clear understanding of, what you hope to get out of this opportunity. So that way there's not miscommunication there. So I'd recommend, trying to be as detailed as possible about, what's in scope, what you do want the volunteer to be working on, or what's out of scope, what is like larger than what you can take on at this time. Sometimes if it's a really, specific volunteer role in an area you're not familiar with, like for me, it would be anything, IT technology related, then maybe bring in someone who, if you have a board member or a close friend who maybe isn't able to do the volunteer role themselves, but at least can help you kind of write out the volunteer position description of what you're really looking for, and help you figure out what that looks like. And I would also say if you're kind of newer to this idea, that you start off with something that's a little bit more low stakes. So something that, if it doesn't happen in a super quick, that it won't be a big problem. So I wouldn't say, if you have something that's urgent that needs to be done, in the next few weeks, that's probably not a good project for your very first one. Or if you have something that's super important that if you don't get it done, it will be catastrophic for your organization. Also not a good thing to start with. I think those are all things that you can build to after you've worked with a volunteer for a while and they've shown that they've been really reliable and dependable and skilled. Then you can build up kind of different projects you offer to them. But I'd say just generally start kind of low stakes and build from there. So once you have that position description, you're able to kind of think more about your recruitment because you know what they're going to be doing to decide who you're going to recruit for. A lot of the same things that you do for recruiting mentors is what you'll do here of, getting the need out there to as many people as you can think of. And this is where it's really helpful to leverage those connections. So, think about, do you have board members or advisory board members that you could share this with and say, hey, do you know anyone that works in graphic design? Do you know anyone that does photography? And see if they have connections. And if they do, asking, would you be willing to do this? And if not, do you know someone else who might be able to? We know that if there's a lot of research that people don't like saying no. So if they have to say no, they can't do that opportunity. They're usually happy to be able to say yes, like, yes, but I can, pass along your information to these other people that might be interested. So that's a good ask to make too. And also think about, is this something that could be done remotely or virtually? If it's something where someone doesn't have to be in person, they don't even necessarily have to live in your community to be able to do it. You could post it on, social media or on our statewide Get Connected volunteer opportunity database, and then someone from anywhere could, potentially work on it if it's something that they can do, and then send back to you the finished project. So that way that just expands your volunteer pool much bigger than whoever's located in your community. Because it could be, someone who moved away from the community years ago would really love the opportunity to be able to, give back to where they're from. And so if they have the skill set and can do it virtually, they might be happy to do it. So, don't think that your volunteer pool is really limited to kind of geographically wherever you are, because it really can be pretty broad. So what I'd like you to do now is think through your ideas that you came up with and try to brainstorm, pick one that you're going to start with and brainstorm where you're going to recruit that volunteer from. So just think about it, and then as you kind of come up with a plan, either put it in the chat or else you can unmute yourself and share out where you think you might go to recruit the volunteer position that you came up with. And the freebie is obviously you can post it on Get Connected, our statewide site. Is there anyone who has an idea that you're not sure where you would start to recruit someone? Jason, put there in the chat, utilizing your current roster of volunteers. So your mentors are a fantastic pool of people who you could kind of tap into to see if they're interested in volunteering in these other ways, because obviously they're mentoring for you, so they care about your organization and your cause, but maybe they also have one of these skills that you're looking for. So you can just send it out in your next communication to mentors that, hey, by the way, we're also looking for someone who can do event photography or who can help us with this fundraiser or whatever it is. And maybe you already have someone. In hiring an intern, definitely not cheating. I think that's also a great place to look, and college students are often looking for that, real world experience or service learning opportunities where they can learn while practicing those skills that they're learning about in the classroom. The other ideas, John, any ideas about where you would reach out to bilingual volunteers?
I was just pondering that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess my initially I just kind of came across just evaluating like, is this something that I would like ask a volunteer to do? But because it's something like currently we'll partner with an organization that like we are paying someone to do this. And then I was just trying to evaluate how I felt to ask that service, but this is all about recruiting skills-based volunteers. So all of the volunteers are people who have skills that are probably like valuable monetarily. So yeah, I think in our like volunteer database, like people indicate like what they're like if they have a second language. So I think that would be a way that we could connect with people who are already familiar with our organization, and then also it wouldn't cover all of our languages, but if we did any kind of like broader volunteer assistance with like check-ins with families and mentors. We could also try and target people who are also bilingual.
Yeah. And that's a great point that, sometimes there is that additional reflection of like, is this an equity issue where I might be asking something of a community that's already kind of being over asked or is already, where it might be important to consider whether this should be a paid position. So I think that's a good thing to think through, but there's also always, often people who are interested in volunteering and providing that skill they have. So it's good to definitely have that conversation and being thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, other ideas. Colleen, any ideas with your marketing ideas?
No, I just threw in the chat, just like in any time you're recruiting volunteers or anybody, just making sure that they see the benefits of what they're doing is always going to be a big, and that personal ask, no matter what, is the best way to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm frequently reading like volunteer engagement research that's like the best way to recruit a volunteer is ask them, which is like, well, obviously, but it really is that personal ask much more than, potentially seeing it on a flyer or on a website when you're able to have that personal connection. So if it's you asking or your mentor is asking for you, or a board member or community partner, that obviously always has that extra benefit. All right. And if you ever, if there's something that you've thought of and you're like, gosh, I really love this idea, I just don't even know where else to start for recruiting that volunteer, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to kind of brainstorm with you. And it's likely something that I've seen other organizations try to recruit for, and happy to provide that one-on-one kind of idea brainstorming. Right. So then after you actually, find that volunteer and you think you're ready to get started, then, what's next in the process? It's very similar to, what you're thinking about in the process for mentoring is after you've recruited them, then you have to do that screening. So that way you can find out if they really are a good fit for that role and qualified for it. And they can decide, is this a good, fit for me and something I have the time and capacity to do. So, as you're thinking about screening, sometimes depending on the project, it might make sense to ask for work samples or some way to know that like this is something that they've done before in the past, or ask for a reference. Or if it's an area that's, well outside the scope of what you have the background in, asking, a trusted friend or board member or someone who does have skill set to help you in that screening process to identify if this person really does have the skills to do what you need them to do. Then for orientation and training, no matter what role a volunteer is doing for you, it's always good to still do an orientation of what your organization does, because that person can then become an advocate for your work and you don't know who else they're going to be talking to about what they're doing. So it's great to, no matter what, always give an orientation of what your organization does, and then training specific to the work that they're going to be doing for you as a volunteer. Then moving into supervision, making sure, again, like with mentoring, that they have that name point of contact, that they know who they should go to when they have questions, concerns, want to bounce ideas off someone. I think with skills volunteers, it's also good to think about, what that frequency of check-ins is. It's good to know that in advance. So that way, you don't give them a project, you don't hear from them and you're like, well, do I check in to see if they've finished it? Or deciding in advance how often you're going to meet so they know, can they, save their questions till your weekly meeting? Is it something they should, call you daily and ask anytime they have a question? Should they email you if they have a question? What that communication is going to look like. Making sure that they know any deadlines or milestones that you have, that you agree upon that in advance. So that way things aren't just lingering forever. Making sure you say, this component, we hope to have this done by this date. This part will need to be done by this date. So that way everyone's on the same page about what's expected. And then also just being honest and clear about expectations. Sometimes people feel hesitant to say, yeah, I mean, they were really off track, but I didn't want to hurt their feelings because they were volunteering for us. So I just let them keep going. Like, no one wants their time to be wasted. No one wants to waste other people's time. So feel free to be very, direct, obviously be polite about it, but if something is veering off out of what you anticipated or were really looking for, just being clear of, I really appreciate you working on this. We're actually hoping to go into more of this direction for these reasons. So do you think that you could refocus the work and do it more like this? Just giving that feedback right away instead of, letting an issue get out of control and then spending a lot of time on something that you'll never use, because that doesn't help anybody. And then, so, throughout that relationship, making sure you just have good communication with the volunteer. And then moving into recognition, similar to your mentors, just thinking about how sometimes we even ask people as they come on to be a volunteer, how they like to be recognized. So, is this someone who would love a shout out on your social media? Is this someone who would like to be profiled in your newsletter? Is this someone who would love like a certificate printed? Would they like a reference for their resume? Is, thinking through what would make most sense for that person, how they'd like to be recognized. And then evaluating the project. It's always good to take time afterwards to get feedback from them on how it went, and especially if you're newer to this, what you could do to improve the process working with someone as a skilled volunteer in the future. And also taking time to reflect on, what was valuable, what was a little bumpy, what would you do different next time, so that way you can continue to improve upon the program. All right, so any questions about any of that, of, how to go about working with a skilled volunteer from there? I do want to share a few resources, and I think that we can make sure that these links get passed on to you in a follow-up email, or I don't know, Mary, if you usually send out the slides. But the Capacity Commons is a website that was developed by Common Impact, and it takes you through the whole process in great depth about how to engage a skilled volunteer. So it starts with, it has a link for an assessment of how to assess your organization to see if you're ready to work with skilled volunteers. Then it goes through each of the steps kind of outlined in great detail, things to think of. They also have a lot of great samples. So if you're like, yeah, I think it would be good to do something with marketing, they have like sample volunteer position descriptions and ideas of where to recruit those volunteers. So sometimes it's nice, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can just go in there and kind of copy what they have and go from there, or even just peruse what they have and go, oh yeah, actually that would be perfect for what we're doing, and I didn't even think of that. So it's a nice website to check out and explore. There's also a skills-based volunteering toolkit that has a lot of great resources, also from Common Impact, to look through and walk you through that process, and a worksheet you could potentially do with other staff of, filling out as you go and brainstorming as a team. What are roles skilled volunteers could help us, and as a team brainstorm those things. Also want to give a quick plug for we partner with the Volunteer Centers of Iowa every year to give the Volunteer Engagement Training Program. It's a 6-part webinar series on volunteer management, best practices, and basics. That does have a cost. It's $125 per person. And then you participate in these hour-and-a-half sessions. They're recorded to. They're led by volunteer center directors across the state who are really knowledgeable. So it's a great thing for, especially if someone's newer to their role working with volunteers, including working with mentors. It's a nice, base layer foundation of how to work with volunteers. And then also in the fall, they intend to also host again their skills-based volunteering boot camp, which covers a lot of what I covered today, but much more in depth. And throughout that process, you, as part of your assignments through that, you'll be developing and creating skills-based volunteer opportunities that then you'll be able to actually, implement. I know sometimes when you attend a training, you're like, this is great information, and then you get back to work of the 800 emails that came in the meantime. So during that session, you actually get to do the work while you're in the session. So by the time that you're done with the boot camp, you've already scoped out and have everything in place for recruiting a skilled volunteer. So just wanted to throw out those additional resources, though, that And again, if you ever have questions or just want to reach out, I'm always happy to help and to chat. So that's what I wanted to cover with you all today. What remaining questions do you have related to skilled volunteers, or really if you just have any general volunteerism questions?
Come on, we can play try to stump Michelle, because it's not possible. So this is your opportunity to pick her brain. She was generous to offer follow-up too, and I dropped her email in chat if you want to just, follow privately. But anyone have any other question they'd like to bring up for the group? Throw out to each other too, your peers that have engaged skills-based volunteers or are looking for similar positions. Hearing none at this time, I'm going to stop the recording.